I'm Lisa Snyderman, and this is Conversations on Creating to Heal. I'm really happy to be speaking with Joanie Calem from Columbus, Ohio, a singer-songwriter, educator, and disability awareness advocate, as well as a mother of a young adult with high-functioning autism, and a trainer for teacher and parents of young people with autism. And hers is a story of finding a way forward, even when no one else has walked that path yet. So welcome, Joanie.
Thank you.
So I wanted to first talk about, I said that you're an educator, you're an artist, and you're also a disability awareness advocate. Do you have a mission or a purpose that maybe explains why these art forms are what you've been drawn to?
Well, I have always found myself singing. And when I was a teenager, I would listen to Joan Baez and Joni Mitchell and all those wonderful singers. And I would listen to their songs and I'd say, I could do that. And I just assumed that everybody thought that when they were listening to music, that everybody listened to music and thought, oh yeah, I could write songs like that. And I remember having a conversation with a friend when I was in my early 20s saying, you know, don't you listen to music and think, oh, I could write songs? And she looked at me and said, never occurred to me. So it then occurred to me that, oh, maybe this is something that I should be doing. Really, when I became pregnant with my first child is when I started writing music. It was as though I was pregnant with a human being, but I was also pregnant with my musical expression.
I love that. That's such a neat way to get into music.
It was very interesting. So initially I was writing a lot of lullabies for my daughter, and then, you know, just expanded out into putting down all my many years of observations of the world into music. I think, though, that my songwriting became much more specific when my son was born with autism. And then my songwriting very much became a matter of both self-therapy and a desire to share with the other parents that I was interfacing with who were struggling on this same uncharted path of how to parent this child who you can't find in the pages of typical child development. There, you know, the child just does not appear in those books. And that's when I found my music became much more directed towards how do we heal ourselves? How do we heal our relationships with our children? How do we heal the world that our children have to walk through?
Oh, that's an amazing story, and it makes sense that it led you to that line of questioning. I think that's so neat that, you know, you've had music to help you through that. And when I introduced you, I said that your story is one of walking this walk that people have not walked before and figuring out a way through that. So right. Talk a little bit about how and why that's your story.
Well, when you say, was that my transformation story, I feel like I had 2 steps of transformation, but really my whole life, you know, if I look back now, there were all these preparations for how to handle what was coming, but unknown yet. The first transformation, I think, was when my first child was 5 months old. My husband was in a near-death accident. And he is a walking miracle. He, you know, it could have been absolutely horrible, and it was fairly bad, but he's a walking miracle 25 years later. And that experience was one of those, you know, you just never know what's coming. which changed the trajectory of our lives and of my daughter's life. You know, her father was suddenly a very different person. A, you never know what's coming around the corner. And B, you have what it takes to handle whatever that is. As surprising and painful as it is at the moment, you've got what it takes to just take this deep breath and figure out the way forward. So that was huge. That was huge. And that was kind of like, oh, you're not going to have this storybook life that you thought you were going to have.
Yeah, that's a really hard thing, right? You don't expect this huge life event and you're forced into a situation that's unknown. But I love that you've been able to rely, you know, on that you have the tools, you have everything that you'll need to see it through. And it sounds like for you, part of that process was also creating, but it sounds like also talk about this disability advocate. How did this transformation help to propel you, or, you know, put you in a situation where you wanted to help others?
So the second step of the transformation was having my son. I knew very early on that something was up. You know, many people's children seem to develop typically, and then at a certain point seem to regress. That was not our case. I knew when I was pregnant that something was different. So I kind of had this preparation of my own, but I was also very scared. I was scared for him. I was scared for what was the world going to be like for him. And, you know, were people going to be accepting and kind? Were people going to be patient? Were people going to be able to and be willing to communicate in a different way? And I think that is what propelled me into becoming an advocate, because with many vulnerable populations, whatever the vulnerability, it is very hard to expect the person who is vulnerable to self-advocate, because they're dealing with the difficulty of their vulnerability. And with the autism population, I mean, there's so many different directions that the difficulty goes in. But for my son, he's not a language person. He speaks, but he speaks as though language is a second language, because it is. He's an artist. He's a visual artist.
It sounds like he's communicating. He's communicating through pictures. He's communicating through visual means, but it's still definitely communication.
Correct. Yeah. But most people do not have the patience to communicate in any way other than verbal. As my son got older and I kept waiting for other people to advocate for him, and it wasn't happening, I realized that I had this tool through my songs that I could very much put into words and into music some of his experiences, some of the things that he has told us over the years. So some of my songs are about the experience of someone working in the world that's hard for. But many of my other songs are just about, why do we even expect everyone to be the same? Mm-hmm. You know, where does bullying and racism and intolerance come from? It comes from, I don't like someone who's different. Well, where did we even come up with this baseline expectation that we're supposed to be the same? It's not possible. None of us are the same as anybody else. Identical twins are not the same. so I just find myself singing about those baseline expectations. And, I think that when I'm doing a teacher workshop, I say, instead of using PowerPoint and statistics, I am using songs and stories, because I think that we have enough PowerPoints and statistics. They're great, they're wonderful. However, I can use music, and I think that goes to people's hearts. I know it goes to people's hearts. People tell me.
Talk about that healing process for you. How does it manifest? It may be physical, it may be spiritual, and it may be for you and for others. But what is that like for you?
For me, it's very spiritual, but it has a physical component. In past years, when my kids were younger, every once in a while, my husband would say to me, "Why don't you just go write a song?" And I was like, "How can you tell that I need to write a song?" And he'd say, "Because you're really antsy." And I've already learned to recognize that when you get a certain kind of antsy, it's because you're working on a song. And so you're not totally here with us. Just go write the song.
Actually, that's funny. I like that.
And so now I recognize that.
Well, let me invite you right now to share something meaningful with us. It can be a piece of art from your journey. And after you play it or talk about it, just tell us a little bit about why you chose it and how it's helping you or others to heal or be fulfilled.
Okay. So this is a song called Prayers. May we find stillness for the days we walk in pain. May we find acceptance of all that comes our way. May we find welcome when we stretch out our hand. May we find wisdom as we walk this land. Wishes for the hard times, prayers for these days. May we all forever grow stronger on our way.
It's beautiful. The lyrics, they're so heartfelt. They're so positive and uplifting. And I'm warmed. Thank you for playing that.
You're welcome.
So talk very quickly about why you created or why you're sharing that song. And then I'll just ask you to share with us some brief life lessons that to promote for healing for others who might be going through something similar.
So that song very much came from a place of, what do I wish for my children as they go out into the world? They are both in their 20s and they are maneuvering all kinds of things in a world that's a little more complicated than when I was in my 20s. And it also was a song of what I wish for all of us. We all have days of pain, be it physical or emotional or psychic or soul. And we all need strength. And we all need to remember that we can do this. It doesn't always feel that way. My sentence when I'm doing disability advocacy to those who do not consider themselves dealing with a disability, so neurotypical people, my one sentence is, behavior is communication. I think that we as humans tend to be incredibly judgmental of other people, and we tend to look at somebody else's behavior as not okay if it's different in some way. And my whole point is that through our behavior, we are communicating something. Because maybe for whatever reason we can't communicate it, maybe we're in pain physically, and so it's hard to think. Maybe we are overwhelmed with anxiety because we have autism and we have sensory processing disorder, and maneuvering the world is hard. And so we can't express ourselves verbally, so we express it through our behavior. So before we jumped to condemn someone else, can we ask, can we be quiet? Can we offer a space for them to perhaps communicate more than what they feel they have time to in a very short interaction? So I wish for all of us, to be aware of different kinds of communication and to not judge.
No, thank you. I'll say behavior is communication. It sounds like a good lesson, a good life lesson for all of us. And thank you very much for coming on to Conversations on Creating to Heal today.
Thank you for having me.